In this lecture, we're going to talk about property value sources. If you have ever worked with animations in QML, you probably know this syntax you see here. Number animation on some kind of properties. And what this is going to do is going to animate this property in a range that you specify for a given period of time here. We want to see how we can build this kind of feature for our own C++ types. And the intent is to have them usable in QML. If you look here, we have a custom C++ type that is called random number. It is using property value sources to change the width here and to change the height here. And inside we have a property that is called max value. And this is going to be the maximum number, all the ceiling of the numbers that we're going to generate with this random number C++ type. So how do we build this? Well, you start by building a custom C++ class. The class has to inherit a specific class called QML property value source. Inside the class, you have to provide this macro, and inside put the name of the QML property value source class. And you have to override the set target method and provide a slot that is going to update the property. And of course, you have to have a field for the property that you want to manipulate in here. These are the basic requirements for this to be recognizable as a property value source, but you also have to build your own logic that you want to follow to update the properties. In this case, we are building a random number generator. So we are going to use a timer here that is going to generate a number at a given time interval. We're going to see how this works in a demo we're about to do. But the important thing is to put together the building blocks that make your class recognizable as a QML property value source. Now that you have a basic idea about this, we're going to go to Qt Creator and see this in action. Here we are in Qt Creator. We're going to create a new project. It's going to be a Qt Quick application as usual. We're going to call it Property Value Sources Demo. Save it in the usual location. We're going to choose our Qt version. Choose the kit we want to use, desktop in this case, and finish. Let's change the title here to say Property Value Sources Demo. We want to create the class in C++, so we say new CPP class. We call it random number. It's going to inherit QObject as usual, and we finish. We want to include a few classes. One is going to be QQML property value source. The other is going to be QQML property, and we want to include QQML.h because it's going to contain the macro for the interface we're going to use in a minute. We want to do a multiple inheritance here and inherit QQML property value source as we saw in the slide. Let's do that. We want to put in our macro. And if you want to know about this macro, you can copy it. Go in the documentation, put it in place here, double click on here, and you're going to see this macro tells Qt which interfaces the class implements. Okay, we are saying that we implement the interface for this class here. Next, we want to put in the set target method. We're going to say virtual void set target. It's going to take a const reference to QQML property. We also want to provide a private slot that says update property. This is going to update the property whenever we need to update it. Let's put an S here. In the private section of the class, we want to have a field for QQML property. Let's call it mTarget property. We also want this class to have an upper bound max number. Let's put a property to model that because we want that to be manipulable or configurable from QML. We're going to say QProperty. It's going to be an integer. This will do. We want to generate the methods, and we move them in the CPP file. Let's go up again, find the other one, set max value. Let's move to the CPP file. The last thing we want to do is to implement set target and the slot that we defined here. We're just going to put in the implementation blueprint. We're not going to implement just yet. Refactor, put in CPP. We want to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to move the slot in the public section of the class because it is going to be used here. Control A, Control I to align. We want to include QTimer because this is going to be updating values at given intervals of time. Let's do QTimer here. Create a QTimer object in our class. And go in the CPP file, do some initialization. We want to initialize the max value to 100 and the timer to new QTimer and put in a parent. This will do. Down here, we want to connect to the timeout signal of the timer and connect it to the update property slot here. Let's do that. We're going to say connect mTimer signal timeout this slot update property. This will do. And we want to start the timer. We're going to say mTimer start. Now we want to see what we do when we update the property. Before we do that, I want to visit the QQML property class to see some kind of things we can do on the class object. Let's go in the documentation and find it. It is a class that abstracts accessing properties on objects created from QML. If you look at it, it has a few methods that we might be interested in. We have a write method that we use to write to the property, and we have a read method that we can use to read from the property. You can read more about this if you are interested. We want to write our property right now. Let's go in the CPP file again, find the method. We're going to say mTarget property, write, and we want to write a random number that we generate. Qt happens to have a class to help us in generating a random number. So we're going to say include QRandomNumber generator. It is this one. You can visit the documentation of it if you want to know more about it. What we are going to use is this public static member global to generate a random number, which is going to be an integer. How are we going to do that? We're going to close this, come back to the CPP file and say QRandomNumber generator global and say bounded because we want a bounded number and pass in mmax value. This is going to give us a random number in the range from 0 to the max value that we specified in here. We initialize this to 100, so we're going to have between 0 and 100. We can put the last semicolon here. And the last thing we need to do for this to work is to set the target. This is going to be a piece of cake, target property equals prop that we pass in here. This should be all we need for this to work as a property value source. We're going to go to main CPP, include our class, random number. We are going to register the type. We're going to say QML register type. It's going to be random number. The module is going to be random util because that's what it is. The version is going to be 1. Minor is going to be 0. And it is going to be available in QML as random number. This should be all we need now. Let's head over to QML, import our random util module, put in one rectangle, idm rect. Let's give it a width of 300, a height of 300, a color of Dodger blue, and do something crazy by saying random number on radius, and we have to specify the max here. And you see that max value is recognized from Qt Creator. We want to have a max value for the radius of 100. Why not? before we run the application, I want you to guess what is going to happen. We are going to see a rectangle. It's going to have this width and this height. It's going to be this color, and its radius is going to be changing every 500 milliseconds. Why is that? Because this random number generator is generating our number every 500 milliseconds, and I noticed that I didn't put in my time. Sorry for that, but it is going to be triggered every half second. And when this is triggered, this update property method is going to be called. We are going to generate our number here, and we are going to write that number to the property, and the result is going to be that number is going to be written to the radius here, and we are going to see the rectangle changing its rounded corners as the radius changes here. Let's run, and hopefully it's going to work. You see that our thing is really working here. We are changing the rounded corners because the radius is changing every half second. And this is really how property value sources work. You just have a few rules you have to follow. You have to inherit this class here. You have to put in your interface macro here. You have to provide the set target method that is going to be used to set your property as a target. We also have to update the property every time we change it in our class. In this case, we are doing that when the timer times out here. We can configure this, let's say 1/2 second. Let's wait until the app runs, and it's going to be changing every 1.5 seconds. We can go crazy and change the radius to be something really big, the max value. Let's make it 300, and it's probably going to become a circle as we do that. Okay. This is really big, isn't it? Let's try something else. We can also do a random number on width. Let's do that. Let's take this out, random number on width, and let's say max value. It's going to be 700. Why not? Let's run, and we should see some crazy things happening right now. Okay, you see that as the width changes, our rectangle here is also changing the shape. I know this is a silly example, but it displays the capabilities you can build into your class if you happen to need to expose your class as a property value source. This is all for this lecture. In the next one, we're going to zoom out a little bit and compare different registration types that we have seen so far. I'll see you in the next lecture.